According to this, we have seen that there is a sort of hierarchy in the supply chain planning process. In particular, we have two general supply chain planning process, which is demand planning and inventory planning, which are, let's say, planning processes, planning activities which are valid, which are transversal, complementary to the three supply chain processes of the supply chain, so source, make, and deliver. While instead then we have specific planning activities for each of the process that characterize the supply chain. So distribution planning for delivery, production planning for make, and procurement planning for source. And in particular, until now, we have focused our attention on demand planning. Demand planning has different way to be called. It is called demand management, it is called demand forecasting, it is called demand planning, but besides the definition, these are the main building block of the demand management, demand forecasting, demand planning process. So we have seen that in a company and in a supply chain, to be consistent from a demand management perspective, you should answer the why question. So what is the role of forecasting in the company? So what forecasting, what demand management is useful for? So how output coming from demand management are used to plan and to execute other processes in the supply chain, which is the level of aggregation. So what we want to manage, which are the characteristics of the demand that we want to manage, and which is the level of description, the level of the unit of analysis of the demand that we want to manage. How we want to manage this demand, so which are the technique and methods that we should use to manage demand, so manage this exogenous variable. So who is responsible of doing that, so organization and roles. How often this need to be made, so the time horizon of demand management, and how much, meaning how is important, and how much time, how much effort the person involved in this process should put in executing this task. The first aspect that we have analyzed referring to demand management is the level of aggregation. The level of aggregation is a fundamental choice because it gives the scope to the process of demand management. In particular, we have seen that first of all, there is a choice that needs to be made in terms of level of the supply chain where the demand forecast, the demand management is focused, because we have seen that we have different type of demand in the supply chain. We have the demand coming from the final customer. We have the demand coming from the point of sales. We have the demand coming from the distribution centers. We have the demand coming from the production system. And we have the demand coming from the supplier. So, first of all, we need to decide when we refer to demand management where we focus the attention. So, which is the type of demand that we want to manage. It is the demand of the final customer, it is the demand of the point of sales, it is the demand of the distribution center, and according to this, shape consistently the demand management process. Then, once decide that, of course, we need to understand which is the object of that demand. And in particular, we have discussed that in supply chain, different vision, different view on the object of demand management can be established, like the market. So if you are referring to all the market in which the supply chain operates in, or just a business area, or just geographical areas, or just region, or everything that can be segmented according to a market perspective, that we should decide how much we aggregate the product in terms of demand management. So if we just predict the general sales or the overall sales of the company, or if we split up different families of product, or if we drill down until stop keeping unit. And finally, last but not least, which is the timing. So we are predicting demand, which is the yearly demand, which is the monthly demand, which is the weekly demand, which is the daily demand. According to this choice, the level of aggregation of our demand management process, and so the scope of our demand management process, can be more or less aggregated. This has implication because if we map the aggregation level in correspondence to the forecast error, so how high is the probability to be wrong in doing forecast or in managing this demand, we can see that the higher the aggregation level, so the higher I aggregate the demand that my demand management process needs to manage, the high is what it is called specification error. Specification error, as you can see written here, is means that at least one of the key feature or assumption of the model which is behind the demand management process is wrong. Demand is exogenous. In order to manage something which is exogenous, which is unpredictable, we should build some model which should be as much as possible near the reality. The more we aggregate the demand, the more we are far from how the demand actually is in practice, and so the higher is the specification error. On the contrary, the higher is the aggregation error, and we have seen this demonstrated according to the fact that different demand have different variabilities, and if we aggregate variable with high variability, variability compensates, so the resulting variable has less total variability. This is explained by the fact that the higher the aggregation level, the lower is the estimation error. So the difference between the actual parameter and the estimated parameter. So by aggregating, I on one side simplify the reality, but on the other side, I am able to build a model which is, of course, an approximation of the reality, but which characteristics are not wrong. So the estimation error, so how much I'm able to predict what will happen, will be more proxy to the actual reality if I am aggregating more. Of course, you need to find a trade-off between the two. So you need to understand if it's worse to have high specification error or it's worse to have high estimation error, and according to the two, finding the optimal level of aggregation according to the characteristic of your supply chain.
We have seen this concept applied to the San Pellegrino case. San Pellegrino case drive you to understand and apply the different concepts which are related to demand planning and demand management. In particular, the first step that we have done with the San Pellegrino case is to just give a characterization of the demand planning process. In particular, to give a characterization of the demand planning process, we have used the same wheel that we have just presented in theory. So when you are asked to characterize the demand forecasting or demand planning process, you need to define the why, the what, the how, the who, the when, and the how much, which means defining the role or forecasting for the company, characterize the level of aggregation, explain some technical method, identify the organization and the roles involved in that, how many times the process is carried on during a year, and the effort spent in the process. For the San Pellegrino case, we see that being a San Pellegrino a push supply chain, the role is critical, so it's a strategic role because the demand planning process needs to support the make-to-stock production and thus like supporting the ability of the supply chain to go into the market. In terms of the level of aggregation, I will show you details next, but we are seeing that for markets, we have a medium-high level of aggregation because they compete in 6 markets, and they aggregate these 6 markets in 2 groups of 3, local and export. For what concerns the product, instead we are a medium-low level of aggregation because we have a grouping of SKU, stock keeping units, with similar packaging, which is like a detail level, a detailed disaggregation of the type of product that they realize, compared to possible higher usage of category or family of product as unit of analysis of the demand management process. While instead for consumer week, we have a medium level of aggregation if we consider like day, week, month, year, and so on. So overall, we can say that the level of aggregation can be considered as medium. In terms of technique as meter applied, we have seen that if you read the case, it's evident that some Pellegrino opt for a mixed or quantitative, so they applied forecast model to forecast the demand, but also qualitative methods, because they ask for sales force and for expert to provides insight about the evolution of the demand in the future, everything integrated and supported by information system. In terms of organizational roles that are included, we have people in the planning department, so in particular the analyst, but also the geographical, so the market area manager, the business director, so the business unit director, and also the sales director. So it's a cross-functional process because it involves both manager and analyst pertaining to different functions. In terms of when the process is performed, we have seen that the process is performed 3 times a year because it takes place every 4 months, and all of these should make us infer that the effort spent in the process is very high, both for the frequency, because it's made 3 times. A full process is made for each type of product that is the unit of the lowest level unit of analysis, so demand management process, 3 times a year. It involves a different type of organizational figure. It uses quantitative, qualitative technique. It have a interesting level of aggregation, so it's like the unit of analysis is not like the highest one, so it's the computational effort of this is not simple, and also it's a critical loss. It's a strategic process, so the effort that the company need to put in the process should be very high. A detailed look about the level of aggregation. We have talked about the fact that San Pellegrino operates in 6 different markets: Italy, France, and Germany in Europe, and United States, Canada, and South America for America, and they group these in 2 different markets, so from 6 to 2 clusters, local and export. In terms of product, they have 3 different categories: water, beverage, and juice. Each category is then has particular families of that falls within each. In particular, for beverage, they can be tea and orange juice, but there are also other one. And then within each category, we have different type of stock keeping units, so units that are kept in stock in the company. In particular, for orange juice, we have, orange juice of 33 cl in can, Kino, which is another type of beverage, in 33 cl of can, and lemon, which is another type of beverage, orange juice beverage, lemon flavor, 33 cl. From a demand management perspective, product with the same type of packaging, in this case can made of 33 centiliters, are the unit of analysis of the demand management process. So you can see that it's a medium-low level of analysis, because among the different aggregation we can make, we are just like cluster on stock keeping unit. And this process is carried on for every week. So the details, the demand that we collect is a weekly demand, and the demand that we forecast is a weekly demand. So it means that it's not like the lowest aggregation as possible you can make, but still something that is not monthly, is not semesterly, is not yearly. So still an interesting level of detail kept from a time perspective in the demand management process.